everyone. I'm Linda Nickell, and welcome to the Happiness Hour. Every week, we meet here to talk about photography with a different guest that helps us all connect, inspire, and create. You can find the schedule for our upcoming presentations on my website at lindanickell.com. If you can't join us live, you can always subscribe to the Happiness Hour YouTube channel so that you don't miss any of the sessions. Tonight's guest is Willa Friedman. Willa is a Virginia-based photographer whose work is often viewed in solo and group exhibitions, as well on her website, WillaFriedmanPhotography.com. In tonight's presentation, Pandemic Fantasy, Willa will share some of her fantastical wildlife sightings that wandered the streets close to her home during the pandemic. Using a little post-processing magic and her creative imagination, Willa will amuse you and impress you with her wildlife series. You can connect with Willa through her website, WillaFriedmanPhotography.com. Welcome to the Happiness Hour, Willa.
Thank you, Linda.
Well, I'm very, very pleased to have you here tonight. I always like to start off, if I can get away with it, with a little bit of disclosure. I happen to be, most people in this room know, I was in DC, Washington, DC, for about 9 weeks this past autumn, because that's what you guys call it over there. We call it fall in Texas, but you literally have autumn. And I was with a friend of mine who happens to be somebody that you know through your photography club in the the Virginia area. And she said, let's grab some coffee and some cookies. And by the way, a friend of mine has an exhibit here. So we wandered in, and within 2 or 3 of the photos that we were looking at, they were, it was your exhibition. I looked at her and she looked at me, and I'm like, I'm going to ask her. So she says, I think that she would do your happiness hour. So with that just gave me license to shoot you an email. And fast forward, I guess, almost 9 months later, here you are. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for sharing your work. I skimmed over a bio for you. So if you would like to, please take advantage of filling in the gaps for us. And welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Let's see if it works this time.
It will. Bob, I've got my fingers crossed. If not, we're going to fire you on this.
Thank you. Let me tell you about my fantasy. Back when the world locked down, there were stories about animals being seen in places where they never were because there were people. There were lions sleeping in the roads all over Africa because there were no cars going out. There were boars, wild boars seen in Barcelona. Coyotes in San Francisco. Raccoons in Central Park in New York. But I think they're always there. They're just never seen. Birds were seen everywhere, but there was nobody out looking for them. There were whales in New York Harbor. There were dolphins in the Bosphorus, in the canals in Venice. Deer were everywhere. And there was even a bear in Burke, Virginia, which is the next town from where I live. We don't normally have bears there. And the one that really grabbed me was that there were goats in Wales. Queen Victoria gave a small town in Wales a herd of exotic goats. And since there were no people in the street, the goats were wandering around. They usually lived in the woods and a park outside of the town. And people had never seen them. They knew they were there. Occasionally, somebody was in the park and they might catch a glimpse of a goat. But there were dozens of them walking down the street, nibbling flowers out of window boxes, trimming the hedges, and just generally messing up the town. But it really grabbed me. This is I want to go photograph that and I can't. And all of these things sounded so interesting, it couldn't go photograph them. Whenever I read about something interesting, I want to go and photograph it. And we're all in this lockdown. So I decided I would do this at home. The first thing I looked for was a goat. Anyway, I didn't have the kind of goat. What are you showing me?
Use the mouse to get moved the next. I don't think that'll move. Maybe.
Oh, okay. I didn't have the right kind of goat, but a goat is a goat. I photographed this one in the Columbus Zoo. It's a markhor, the national animal of Pakistan. When it's there, they've had a lot of trouble keeping it in the zoo. It's been picked up all over the city because the cage, they can't make a cage that will keep it. But anyway, I did photograph it several years ago, and I thought, well, okay, I can do something with that.
And the next one should work. If not.
And so I selected it from this photo. So there's my goat. And then I had to find a place for it. I didn't have a town in Wales, but in addition, it's sitting down. And so there were only so many things I could do with a sitting down goat. So that's where I ended up putting it. Great Falls, which is a national park just outside of Washington, D.C. And I thought he looked really cute there. So that was my first production. Yeah, they're too small. The next animal that I selected was a giraffe. I had lots of giraffes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll do it.
But most of my animals were not photographed for this purpose. So the goat was sitting down. The giraffe is lost in the grass. And so I had to find a place to put him where he didn't need to have feet. That didn't work. Since I couldn't put the goat nibbling on the flowers, I thought the giraffe would be good, but I couldn't figure out how to give it feet. But I found some tall plants. This is right outside the Smithsonian Museum. And they're probably 10 feet tall, but it still needed feet. That didn't work until I found that plant and I could hide him behind the stairs. So that was the next one. That's just an old barn out in the country on somebody's property, but it didn't say no trespassing. So I photographed it and decorated it with the giraffe. I also favor polar bears in the zoo. I've never been any place that they live, but in the zoo. But this one is kind of cute. So I separated him and turned him the other way because that's how I happened to meet him. And then looked for a place for him. He's complete, but water wouldn't work because I needed a reflection. And I had an interesting time doing that, but it is possible to construct a reflection in Photoshop. And there he is. This was an abandoned building that I think was probably a church, although when we walked into it, there was a nest of buzzards, and all the buzzards took off through a broken window and made a lot of noise. And then we found the nest with eggs in it, so we didn't spend that much time there, but enough to get a few pictures. I photographed this one in Yellowstone. We were photographing a sunrise, and this is how much of the elk I was able to get because I had a long lens on and he walked that close to me. But separated, selected out, he looked like he had some potential. That's a historic old house in Waterford, Virginia. That's a statue known as the Merchant Marine Memorial, or locally as the Seagull statue. And in DC, we're all crazy for pandas. So, of course, I have a library of pandas. Pandas just sit there and chew on bamboo. They do absolutely nothing except look interesting. Pulled out almost a complete panda. They usually are hiding behind bamboo, which they're chewing, or just in the bushes. There's the panda. Again, I've turned it the other way because the background that I found for it is actually, it's the remains of a church in St. Michael, Maryland. The engineering study before it was built apparently was faulty, and they put it too close to the Chesapeake Bay. So it's not age, it's just the land is eroding under it, and so it's no longer usable. But I thought the panda looked properly sad there. And in Africa, when you come to a pond or a pool, there are hippopotamuses in it. And when there's one, there are always many. This is a bunch of different hippopotamuses that I've selected in Photoshop, and they're in a pool in front of the Capitol. But I wanted to just use one. And so this is a fountain in front of the Library of Congress. And since all I had were hippopotamus heads sticking out of the water, I put him in the pool, and then I made it fit. That's an elephant, but if photographed in Africa, but I don't think I have one elephant that is complete. They're all behind a tree, coming out of woods, in deep grass. They all have parts missing. So fitting it someplace was kind of a challenge. Oh, there's the elephant. No feet. And there it is again in the same church that had the buzzards. It was a great open door. And zebras. Graphically, I love zebras. They're so interesting. They look so interesting. They're so hard to work with because all the automated things in Photoshop want to separate the black stripes from the white stripes rather than selecting the whole animal. But I finally did get zebras. Lots of zebras. And zebras hang out in bunches. I think that's the same one facing the other way because they're so easy to turn in Photoshop. And I wanted a place that's familiar to people in my area. And that in the background is the Woodrow Wilson Bridge. On the left is Virginia, and on the right is Maryland. And in between is bumper to bumper traffic almost all the time. This little point of land was probably 6 or 8 feet long, but there's no sense of scale because there's nothing there to give it a sense of scale. So I was standing on a boat ramp, the boat launch ramp, when I took this picture, and I knew it was going to work for something. So that's become almost a trademark. You saw this one in the show, Linda.
I did.
You did.
Mhm.
And it's kind of everyone's favorite. And then in Old Town Alexandria, which is 10 miles from where I live, some kind of store closed. I don't know what it was. I don't remember. But during the pandemic, it closed. And they have kind of a sense of humor. The new occupants have done this to the front of the store. This center part was a store window, a display window. And I thought it needed a little work. So first I opened the door and stuck in a lioness from the zoo. But I didn't like that members only. It seemed so unfriendly. So I added a spare zebra. And that's what I did during the pandemic out of boredom. That was my project.
It's so clever. Clever.
A lot of spare time.
I was going to say, it probably took you a little bit of time to figure out which
Oh.
animals
Oh,
use versus the scenes, and then making things fit the way were.
a lot of trial and error.
Yeah.
I understood the principles of how to do it, but I had never actually done anything that complicated. And then I had to use what animals I had.
Right.
But the backgrounds were the problem.
Right.
But we could still go out to places where I could photograph new backgrounds, like along the Potomac River, the Wilson Bridge, the seagull statue.
Right.
A whole bunch of them were photographed for backgrounds. Once I had animals, I kind of got a feeling for where they would fit.
Oh, was this the last image in your presentation?
Yes.
Okay, I'll get you to take that down so we can chat for a second. My question for you is, have you continued putting together these, I don't know, composites since the pandemic, is, I don't say it's like long gone behind us, but it kind of is in my world. Are you still kind of tweaking photos and having fun with it? Or was this like that one little project and
oh no, the lions are very recent.
right. So do you see as you're going about now, are you taking photos on purpose of maybe going to the zoo and doing purposeful shots so that now you know where you can put them in other photos? Or is this just kind of like, I'll throw this together today?
When I see something like that building with the painting of the lion in one of the doors, I said, oh, that needs my touch. And so I added the other lion and the zebra, but it has to jump out and grab me, I think.
And when you said the zebra was in the exhibit, were the hippos in the exhibit, or why does that seem so familiar to me?
Which one?
The hippos, where you turn them into a fountain. Was that in the show?
That was in. Oh yeah. I think one of the polar bears were.
Mm-hmm.
Or the elk were there.
Yeah. There were several of them jumped at me, and I thought, I know I've seen this. Did I see that? Sometimes I see so many images, but I'm pretty sure it was the hippopotamus photo that said, I really want her to come do this because I love hippopotamuses. And I thought it was just kind of, somebody used this in the chat, clever. It was just clever. I don't see those things. I can't visualize. I would never dream to open hippopotamus mouth to make it into a fountain.
Oh no, the mouth was open.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean is like.
But I just moved it into position so
right.
The water went into its mouth.
My creativity level's not that high. But one of the things too, well, when I saw your exhibition, and guys, it's different on this little bitty screen, but when you were standing in front of them, I actually walked through the exhibit twice. And I also bought 2 cookies. But this was in a little bakery.
Coffee shop.
Coffee shop. And it was a bakery for all I care because I was there for the sweets. But what I found kind of interesting was I had seen, I don't remember if it was on Netflix or BBC, but there was a documentary that Sir David Attenborough narrated, and it was called The Year Earth Changed. And it was basically footage and, him narrating all these places animals are showing up because there weren't people. It was basically the streets had been abandoned. And it was just, that's when I saw your photos, it took me straight back to that documentary. But you had done it in a fun, whimsical way of keeping yourself busy during a COVID lockdown. So I was super excited when you said that you would come and show us your photos, because this is something that we haven't had in the Happiness Hour yet. So this was just kind of fun to have these, just a different story, a different way to use your photographs and your post-processing skills. So thank you for sharing. I'm going to look really quick. I was too busy talking for any questions in here. I think I see one. Karen's question was, the reflection is great. And she's wanting to know, I don't know which one that was, Karen, but
Polar bear.
Okay, yeah. She says, do you ever add a shadow?
Yes. I try not to have to, because it's tricky not to make them look
Phony.
kind of phony and too much.
Too much, right.
But there was one I was trying to think of. Fortunately, I figured out after working with it for a while that a lot of them are in water because the animal wasn't complete. There were no feet. So I had to put it in water, like the zebras.
That lends itself to so easy.
I selected some of them there. Okay.
There you go. Yep.
I included the reflection so that I wouldn't have to build one. But yes, I did make shadows in some places.
Places where it called for. That's great. Darlene's curious, are you finding the new quote select object close quote features in Photoshop CC helpful? Are you using them?
No, I'm not using them. I'm still using CS6 and Adobe Camera Raw. I don't use Lightroom.
Okay.
I took a lot of classes when I first got into photography, and I know how to do it. So I find that the automated things that I use make it harder because I know how to do it. Mm-hmm. If you don't know how to do it, yes, it's a big help. But with a lot of practice, it's not.
That's perfect. Well, I've had fun looking at these. For me, when I looked at them in person, I could almost hear the stories that you're creating that you told tonight. And it was weird for me to have that kind of context, but it's been kind of fun to have you here to kind of give that insight of why you picked certain animals in certain locations. So I super appreciate that, because it's kind of a fills in the blank for me. All right, with that, I'm looking at, I think I've caught all the questions that were in here. So let me go ahead and close out this session. All right. And if you guys have any last minute questions, now's the time to type very quickly. But all right. With that, Willa, thank you for coming on, talking to my group here at the Happiness Hour and sharing your work and that creativity, because that is in itself very inspiring. Guys, you can connect with Willa through her website, willafriedmanphotography.com. And the next week, Nicola Olick will join us with his presentation, Bending the Rules of Architectural Photography. Until next time, go out and create something beautiful. And I hope that we see you again soon.